I'm Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and I'm going to show you the really critical things you need to know about loading your brush. So I'm going to show you some things today that are absolutely going to change your painting game. The way you load your brush greatly impacts how you get to paint, and we're going to start out with some basic tool concepts that I'd love you to have for this project. I do definitely want you to do this along with me because I think it's really going to surprise you. You're going to want a towel that you can use to put paint into. You can reuse these. You can put these in the washer. That's perfectly fine. And I have towels for years and years, so it's just one and done. I also have some paper towels aside. You're going to need a surface to paint on. And I have red and black paint. There is a reason for that. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to correctly load a brush. So there's the ferrule, there's the heel, there's the belly, there's the toe. You're going to come in here and dip the brush. This is synthetic filaments and heavy body paint. Drag off the extra drops, come to your paint, pulling out and flipping the brush. The act of doing this is pushing paint into the belly. And if you've done that correctly, even with heavy body paint, you'll have a smooth application that you can offload even by flipping the brush. And as you can see, it's emptying out the belly. All right, I'm going to rinse that out. And I'm going to show you a couple problems you might run into. The first problem I see a lot of people running into is too little paint. They're trying to be controlled and they're trying to have things not get away from them, but when they're loading the paint, they're being a little bit too precious about it, and it ends up being a great dry brush, but not really a great load out of the paint. So that's really normal, happens to a lot of people. The next one I see is that people get too much water into the paint, and what that does is that gives you too watery of an application. It doesn't dry well. It takes longer to bind. And as you can see there, it's just a little too thin. Even with that gorgeous red pigment, it's not going to work. And also we're starting to see something that we're going to talk about later called foaming. All right. One of the things that you can do to see if you have too much or too little water is check your paper towel. Paper towel is going to tell you a couple things. It's going to tell you if your brush is too wet, and it's going to tell you if you have any pigment in your brush. If you find that your brush is holding too much water or is too wet between applications, the way that you fix that is you use your towel to wipe out and then come here and load, and you'll be back into the correct amount of water each time. And then even then I will pull the paint out of my brush between rinses, so I'm not putting so much pigment in my water. That's pretty typical for synthetic brush, but we paint with different types of materials in our brush. This is a hog brush. Hog brush is bristles that come from a hog, and like hair or bristles, as it becomes wet, it holds the water and it changes the nature of the brush. For heavy body paint, you don't want your hog brush so wet for a variety of reasons. So one of the things that you do is you do want to get it wet to prime it if you're doing just traditional painting things. But this here, this is too wet. So what I do is I will pull the extra moisture out of my hog with a towel. That way I have enough dampness to work the paint. But when I come in here, I can do the kind of painting that I would expect to be able to do. All right, let's get into our black here where I can do nice thick applications of painting. And as you can see, it gives me that rough painterly quality, but isn't messing with me. Now, right now, we're in a perfect opportunity to tell you another problem about loading your brush. So you pulled a lot of paint, a lot of black paint into your brush. And one of the first things that I see happens is that people go to wash it out. They go back and forth. And they drag off thinking that it's clean, and they get into their paint and discover that it's dirty. So the correct way to change a color on a brush is what's called a vigorous wash. You come into the water. It's exactly what you think about. What I'm doing is I'm getting the water out of my hog, out of any brush I have, and I'm going to check it on my paper towel. That could be the number one thing that's happening, that's in a hidden kind of trap in your brush that's dulling your colors and messing you up, and you may not even know what's going on. So make sure that when you're doing big color changes like that, you do a vigorous rinse. The other thing that I want to talk about in acrylic paint, and I'm going to get this damp again, if I have too much water on my hog and I come here and I'm too rough with my load and I'm vigorous, you're going to see a bunch of air bubbles. This is foaming. Acrylic paint actually wants to foam, and you can see it on the surface here. It wants to do that. You can even see it's getting together. And I see people do this all the time. Those bubbles can stay in the paint mix. They can stay in there and cause problems. The acrylic paint companies are constantly putting products in to prevent that for you. And so you don't want to do that. You want to control your water, and you don't want to be too vigorous. See right there, we can even see that there's still some paint in the brush. Another couple of loads that you might be doing as you're painting are thick loads. These are loads where you apply the paint in a very thick manner, and you might paint in a very thick manner, creating texture and interest in your painting through those thick applications of paint. You can see that I don't really work or load both sides of my brush to do this. I just come in and grab what I need and then apply it on the canvas. I need to do a good vigorous rinse out. I'm going to check and make sure that I'm there. And we're going to talk about a corner load. Sometimes on your brush, you're going to want to just get a little bit of the paint. And in this one case, as long as you're not getting two colors in there, you can come in and capture the corner load. That's where you tap in and you've just got that corner of your brush loaded. I can control even spots, all kinds of tiny details, just doing corner loads, even on a big bright brush. Something that throws a lot of people is a big brush, right? How do you load a big brush? It feels messy. It feels intense. They're wide. They may be unwieldy in the cup. The first thing I want to say is a big brush holds big water. So get them into your cup. Make sure that you get them off on a towel. And when you come and load them, and we're going to do a nice little red and black mix, just so you can see that, I'm going to keep that mostly to the toe. And I'll let you see that go out. But I can still flip my brush and get that over. So it's just about getting a little bit of control. Still doing my flip. There we go. And that's what you would do with your big brush. These are extra hard to get clean. You'll want to just sort of rinse them out so the paint isn't on them. Brush them out like that, and then put them aside for later when you're going to use them. Sometimes when you're painting, you're going to use a detail brush. We all love detail brushes. There's a couple tricks though with the detail brushes that you need to be aware of. The correct way to load them is to bring your brush in, dip again, not quite to the ferrule, drag off the extra water, come in, pull out, roll over. You're going to do the same roll that you did before, so that when you come in and you do the stroke, you've got a nice ample load that works on your brush. But there is a crazy trap. When you go to rinse out, and I'm going to just let this happen, there just went, I'll try to get it again. There are these hidden drops of water that are on the ferrule that will run down. So even if I drag the brush off, I'll still have those. So when I rinse out before I go load, I will often wipe my brush on a towel just to make sure I don't have one of these little water drops hiding there. The more detail or small your brush is, the more that hidden drop happens on the vigorous rinse out. So it's just something to be aware of. However, think about it. When you're doing a small little detail brush, sometimes heavy paint, right, can be a little bit hard to load if you're trying to get smooth, tiny little fine lines. It goes dry brush really quickly. So what you have to be able to do is correctly thin your paint. Now you can bring a big brush with clean water over and squeeze a drop and work it in with a palette knife. Or you can take another brush that you're using and you come over and you just keep dipping one drop of water at a time, swirling it around till you start to thin it enough for the tiny detail brush to be able to work. The tiny detail brush then can come in and you load just on the toe, and let's look at the difference between those lines. It's like an opera singer singing a long note, isn't it? We're still going. That's the difference between my line experience and sometimes a beginner's line experience is I understand about how to thin that paint. This is a Monogram liner, by the way, if you're like, that's the best thing. Now you're going to notice here from the loads and the washes out that there's bits of pigment in that brush. That is what messes up your brushes between painting sessions. So you're definitely going to want to wash those out. The last thing I'm going to show you to do is how to load a blending brush. This really throws people off. Now this is an oval mop. I'm going to get it wet because you do want them primed with water, probably cleaner water than that. I don't know if I have any more at the end of this video. I'm going to wipe off here, and I will often use my towel. And so what I have is a brush that's damp, but not so damp it wets the paper towel. Come in and load at the toe or the edge. That way when I brush back and forth, I'm not having any problem. You can see where it is. And come here and get that nice blending brush blending that we like so much. But it's all about keeping it there. Remember, when you rinse it out, it's going to be very soaked. I mean, it's holds so much water. I think if I put it here, you can kind of see it. It's a lot of water that brush just naturally holds. And that would be too much for your acrylic paint. So you can see why I keep a towel around to load it. So those are these basic things about loading brushes and the way water, brushes, and paint work together, depending on filaments, depending on if they're natural or synthetic, whether you're trying to create little detail lines, load big things, load, rounds, whatever you're working on, having that relationship between how much water is in your brush and how much paint is on your brush makes a really big difference in your painting experience. I'm sure I'm going to hear from somebody today about how this video made them realize something crazy that they didn't know before, and that is totally why I make these. I really want you to be good to yourselves and be good to each other. And I'm going to see you at an easel really soon. Bye-bye.